There's a moment that happens just after twilight settles and before true darkness takes hold. When the air cools suddenly, the shadows stretch and thicken, and the forest begins to whisper in a language older than memory. It's in that moment, with the last glow of day bleeding out behind the trees, that I learned what real fear tastes like. Not the kind you get from movies or haunted houses. No, I'm talking about the kind of fear that digs into your bones, that doesn't let you sleep, that follows you home and changes how you look at the world. That fear found me deep in the Great Smoky Mountains, and it's never really let go. I'd always thought the Smokies were magic. Rolling fog like breath on a mirror, endless ridgelines like the backs of sleeping giants, and that unmistakable scent of pine and wet earth after the rain. It was early October, prime time for the fall colors to paint the canopy in crimson, amber, and gold. My girlfriend at the time, Cassie, and I had planned this RV trip for months. We were both 29, both worn out from the city, and both craving silence so deep we could hear ourselves think again. She was from Knoxville, so these mountains were practically her backyard. I was the outsider, the one seeing it all with fresh eyes. That first night, parked in a secluded corner of a small campground near Elkmont, everything felt exactly as it should. Quiet, alive, ancient. The first odd thing happened around midnight. I'd stepped outside to take in the stars, which were unusually sharp even for this part of the country. The fire had burned low, just enough to cast a warm flicker over the picnic table and the edges of the tree trunks. That's when I heard it. Not a rustling, not a branch breaking, but something more deliberate, a rhythm. 3 distinct knocks, heavy and hollow like a hand pounding wood. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. My first thought was a bear. My second, some prankster from another campsite. But when I scanned the tree line with my flashlight, there was nothing. Just the long silence that comes after something decides to announce itself. Cassie was already asleep inside the RV. I didn't wake her. I told myself I was overreacting, letting the night play tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had watched me from just beyond the edge of the firelight. That kind of gaze, you don't see it, you feel it, like a weight pressing down between your shoulder blades. The next morning, I brushed it off. We went hiking to Laurel Falls, then up along the Little River Trail, where moss clings to every rock like velvet and the water murmurs like a lullaby. We even spotted a mother deer and her fawn grazing near the path. It was beautiful in that soul-repairing kind of way. Still, something in me stayed tense, like a thread pulled tight. Cassie noticed it. She kept asking me if I was okay. I kept lying and saying I was just tired. That second night, we moved deeper into the forest. A friend of Cassie's had told us about a primitive camping spot. No amenities, no lights, just a clearing with a rock-ringed fire pit, this right along an old, barely used forestry road. It wasn't even on most maps. That should have been our first warning. But the idea of solitude had seduced us, and we wanted the kind of experience you can't buy in a campground brochure. The kind that feels like the earth hasn't been touched in years. We parked the RV on a patch of flattened grass, started a fire, cooked some canned chili, and listened to the sounds of the mountains as the sun dipped behind the ridges. Owls hooted, a fox barked in the distance, wind rattled through the birch trees. Cassie sat across from me, face lit orange by the flames, sipping hot cocoa and talking about how she used to come out here with her dad when she was a kid. I remember thinking how content she looked, how the wilderness brought out this quiet, grounded version of her. I remember wondering if I could ever feel that at ease. I never got the chance to find out. Just after 1 a.m., I woke up to the RV rocking, subtle but unmistakable, like someone was pushing it gently from the outside. My first instinct was that an animal had leaned against it, but it didn't stop. It happened again, then again. I grabbed the flashlight and edged toward the front window. Nothing. Just the pitch black forest and the distant hiss of wind through the pines. Then I heard the knocking again, but this time it wasn't on a tree. It was on the RV. 3 knocks. Closer. Louder. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Something was circling us. I turned to Cassie, and to my shock, she was already sitting up, eyes wide. "You heard it too," she whispered. She'd grown up with the Smokies. She knew their moods, their sounds, but the way she looked at me in that moment told me this wasn't something she'd heard before. I mouthed, "Stay here," and slipped outside into the cold. The fire was long dead. The flashlight beam caught nothing but trees and underbrush, all shivering under a thin mist that had crept in like breath on glass. I moved around the RV, slow, deliberate, not sure what I was expecting to find. And then I saw it. About 30 feet out, just past the tree line, something moved. It was tall, taller than any man I'd met, and its outline didn't match any animal I'd seen. The worst part, it didn't move like it was trying to hide. It moved like it knew I was watching, like it wanted me to see it. And then it was gone, silent, sudden, as if it had never been there at all. We didn't sleep the rest of that night. Come dawn, we packed up in silence and left. Cassie didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. There was something primal in her silence, an old inherited fear from generations who'd learned to respect what lived out in those woods. Over the next few days, we tried to shake it off, camping in busier areas closer to ranger stations. But the fear lingered, like the taste of smoke long after the fire's gone out. We tried to laugh it off, tried to rationalize it, but neither of us really believed the stories we told ourselves. Because deep down, we knew. The Smokies are beautiful, but they're also alive in a way most people don't understand. And some parts of them, some corners, they don't want you there. They'll let you in, sure, but they won't always let you leave the same. We drove out of those woods with the radio off, each mile feeling heavier than the last. I remember watching the trees blur past the window and thinking how quickly a place can turn on you. How something so ancient and beautiful can flip like a coin and show its darker face. Cassie's hand stayed on my knee the entire drive, firm and trembling, as if she was grounding herself in the one thing she could still trust. And I realized then that even though neither of us had spoken about what we saw, we both understood that something had shifted between us and the wild. We were no longer visitors. We were survivors of something we couldn't name. By the time we reached the edge of Gatlinburg, the world felt normal again. Streetlights, people, gas stations, the safe hum of civilization. But there was a thin film of unreality over it all, like we were watching life happen from behind glass. We pulled into a campground just outside of town, a proper one, with power hookups and picnic benches and kids riding bikes in circles. I'd never been so relieved to hear the sound of laughter. That night, for the first time in a while, we both slept. But it wasn't peaceful. I dreamed of that knocking. Always 3, always closer. Cassie left a few days later to return to work in Knoxville. I stayed behind with the RV, needing more time. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was fear, but I didn't want that thing, whatever it was, to chase me out of the Smokies for good. I figured if I stayed near people, near lights, I could shake the feeling off like dust. But it never fully left. I found myself scanning the trees at every stop, locking the RV door 3 times before bed, and waking up at every creak of the frame. Something had been stirred in me. Something I hadn't known was sleeping. One evening, about a week after Cassie left, I decided to take a short hike near the Chimneys picnic area. It's a well-trafficked spot, not remote, and I thought maybe walking alone in a safe space would help me feel normal again. The trail was gentle, winding along the river, but halfway through I found something strange. Carved into the side of a tree, not freshly, but recent enough, were 3 vertical lines. Deep, clean, about the height of a man's chest. I reached out to touch them, and the bark felt warm, like it had soaked in the afternoon sun. But the lines felt cold, unnaturally so. I backed away and left the trail early, heart pounding. That was when I realized the fear wasn't just from the night in the woods. It had become part of me now. A quiet passenger, always scanning, always waiting. It's the kind of fear that teaches you to listen. To every crack of a twig, every change in the wind, every sound that doesn't belong. It teaches you that nature is not a backdrop for your adventures. It's a force, a presence, and sometimes a warning. I met a ranger named Joel a few days later, an older guy with a weathered face and a quiet way of speaking that made you feel like every word mattered. We got to talking around the fire pit at the campground, and I told him cautiously about what had happened. I didn't expect him to believe me, but he didn't laugh. He just nodded slowly and stared into the flames for a long time before saying, "There are places in those mountains where the trees remember everything, and some of those memories, they don't like to be disturbed." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. After that conversation, I knew I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. Others had felt it too. They just didn't talk about it, not unless you'd already been marked by it, the way I had. Cassie and I didn't last. The trip changed us, or maybe it revealed something we didn't want to see. We tried to go back to how things were before, but some things can't be unseen. Some fears don't fade, they just settle into your bones, silent and patient. I kept the RV. I still camp. I even went back to the Smokies once, a year later, alone this time. I stayed near Cades Cove where the trails are wide and the air smells like sun-baked grass. Nothing happened. No knocks. No shadows. But every night, I sat by the fire and listened, not just to the wind or the owls or the distant sound of water. I listened deeper, to the space between sounds, to the stillness that had once tried to speak to me. You see, RV camping teaches you things, not just about survival or planning or fire safety. It teaches you about presence, about humility, about how small you are when the sky stretches over you and the trees stand like sentinels in every direction. It teaches you that fear isn't always your enemy. Sometimes it's the only thing keeping you safe, the only thing reminding you that not everything out there wants to be found. I've met plenty of folks on the road since then, campers, hikers, vagabonds chasing the next view. Some of them laugh off the idea of fear in the woods. They'll talk about bears and storms and gear malfunctions, but they won't talk about the feeling. The one you get when the woods go quiet too fast, when your skin prickles even though the air is still, when the fire flickers for no reason and you realize you're not alone, not really, but if you felt it, you know. And if you haven't, well, maybe that's for the best. Because there are things in the Smokies older than stories, older than roads and trails, things that don't care how advanced our RVs are or how much we paid for our solar panels or how good our satellite signal is. They watch us come and go year after year. And sometimes when the timing is just right, they remind us that the wild does not belong to us, that we're only visitors, temporary, fleeting, shadows that pass through the trees. I don't tell this story to scare you away from camping. I tell it because I love it, because I still believe in the healing power of the woods, in the deep silence you can only find under a starlit canopy, in the peace that comes from sitting still while the forest breathes around you. But I also believe in respect, in awareness, in the sacred understanding that some places carry a weight we can't explain. And if you ever find yourself out in the Smokies, in a clearing that doesn't feel quite right, with the fire burning low and the night pressing close, and you hear it, that knock, 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 don't ignore it. Don't pretend it didn't happen. Pack your things, say thank you, and leave. Because the biggest mistake you can make in the wild isn't getting lost, it's pretending you're in control when you're not. I used to think fear was something to overcome, a weakness, something you leave behind once you've gained enough experience. But fear, the kind that hits you in your gut and shortens your breath, is just another way the land speaks to you. And when it speaks, you better listen. That night in the Smokies didn't just haunt me, it educated me. It peeled back the layers of all the stories I'd heard growing up about haunted woods and strange disappearances, and made me realize they weren't stories at all. They were warnings dressed up as folklore. Caution signs passed down through generations that we, in our arrogance, have learned to laugh at. There's a rhythm to the wild, a pulse, and once you've felt it go still, once you've been in a place where even the birds refuse to sing, you start to see the world differently. You stop walking into the forest thinking it's yours to conquer. You start walking into it like you're entering someone's home, and you act accordingly. I've been all over the country since then, from the moss-laced trails of Olympic National Park to the jagged, wind-scoured peaks of Colorado. I've parked my RV in deserts where the silence roars louder than traffic, and in forests where fog crawls like a living thing. And I've learned that every place has its own spirit, its own presence. Some are kind, some are cold, and some are watchful. The Great Smoky Mountains, they're watchful. It's in the way the mists roll in faster than they should, the way you can walk the same trail 3 times and it'll feel different each time. The way your dreams change out there, growing longer, stranger, heavier, and the way the mountains sometimes fall deathly silent as if holding their breath, just waiting for you to notice. There was one evening, months later, in a Tennessee rest area overlooking the distant ridgelines, where I ran into an old man parked in a weather-worn airstream. His skin looked like sun-creased bark, and his eyes were pale and sharp like a crow's. We chatted over instant coffee, the kind that tastes like metal but warms your hands just right. He asked me where I'd been camping lately, and when I told him about the Smokies, he went quiet. "You hear it?" he asked eventually, not specifying anything. I nodded. He didn't need to say what it was. He just muttered, "You don't stay where you ain't welcome." And that was the whole conversation. I've never forgotten that, because that's what it comes down to, really. Being welcome. Being allowed. Being permitted to exist in a place without disturbing the balance. RV camping gives us access to places most people only dream about, but it also tempts us to believe we're immune, safe inside our steel shells with propane heaters and backup batteries and canned soup. But out there, none of that matters. If you're not welcome, the wild will tell you, sometimes with a whisper, sometimes with a knock. I went back once more just to see if I'd imagined everything. Parked in a wide, open campground near the southern entrance, surrounded by other campers and their kids and dogs and laughter. But late one night, I took a walk alone down a side trail, just a short loop, barely a mile, enough to feel the dark press in again. And halfway through, in the deepest part of the loop, I saw them. 3 deep gashes carved into the trunk of a maple tree. Not new, not old, just waiting. I didn't panic, I didn't run. I just turned around, walked back to the RV, and whispered a quiet thank you into the night. Not because I was grateful for what happened, but because I had finally understood what it meant. The fear wasn't the enemy. It was the teacher. The Smokies had shown me something few people ever get to see, and let me leave with my soul still intact. That's a gift. I don't need to chase that feeling anymore. I don't need to test the boundaries of what waits in the dark. These days, I pick my campgrounds carefully. I study the land, listen to the locals, and pay attention to the silence between the sounds. And when the forest tells me it's time to go, I go. Because RV camping isn't just about exploring the beauty of this country, it's about learning where you fit in it. It's about understanding the sacred, unwritten rules of the land. And above all, it's about humility. Knowing that no matter how advanced our tech is, no matter how many gadgets and tools we bring, we are still guests out there, temporary, borrowing space in something far older and wiser than we are. So if you ever find yourself driving through those mist-covered ridges of the Smokies, if you park your rig under a sky lit with stars so bright it hurts, and if the wind shifts in a way that feels just a little too deliberate, listen. If the woods go quiet, listen harder. And if you hear it, that knock, that rhythm, that low and patient pulse from somewhere behind the veil, don't be foolish. Don't go looking for what made the sound. Don't challenge it. Don't try to film it for the internet. Just pack your things, thank the mountain for its warning, and leave with grace. Because my biggest fear was never the thing that stood in the dark that night. It was the realization that it had always been there, waiting, watching, and deciding who gets to leave and who doesn't. There are moments in life when silence becomes too loud to ignore, when the stillness of nature no longer soothes but warns. That was the first thing I felt as the sun dipped behind the jagged ridgelines of the Sierra Nevada, and the air inside my RV turned cold. Not from the temperature outside, but from something else, something unseen. And that's the terrifying part about RV camping in California. It's not just the terrain that can kill you, it's the timing. It's knowing when not to be there. And if you get that wrong, well, some folks never make it back to tell you what they saw. It was October, fire season. Most people think the danger of RV camping in California starts and ends with wildfires. But those who've lived close to the edge, who felt that eerie static before something unnatural happens, they know the fire is only ever a distraction. The real threat, the kind that claws at your thoughts and keeps you from sleeping, is buried in the silence between the wind and the whisper. I met a man who learned that the hard way. His name was Kyle Jefferson, 49 years old, veteran camper, ex-park ranger. Born in Fresno, raised on trail maps and pine sap. If there was anyone who thought he knew the land better than the land knew itself, it was Kyle. We crossed paths at a remote site near Bucks Lake. You won't find it on any tourist brochure, and that's the way most locals like it. The place is quiet, too quiet. No traffic noise, no air traffic overhead, just the hum of your own nervous system and the occasional hoot of something that doesn't quite sound like an owl. It was the middle of the night when I first heard Kyle's footsteps crunch outside my RV. I opened the door, half expecting to see a lost hiker or a drunk couple looking for their way back from the lake. Instead, I saw a man whose eyes looked like they'd stared too long at something a human being wasn't meant to see. "I wouldn't stay here past tonight," he said. His voice cracked like old tree bark. "Not this week, not during the black moon." At first, I thought he was being metaphorical, some poetic local superstition. But then he sat down beside my fire and told me a story that changed the way I think about every single trip I take into the California wilds. It was a story that began on the same night, years earlier. Same moon phase, same week, same campsite. Only back then he wasn't alone. He was with his younger brother, Matthew, and their friend from the Forest Service, Julie Tran. They were tracking a series of reported animal mutilations, not unusual during migration season when predators get bolder, but the wounds they were finding weren't from animals. No bite marks, no claw patterns, just cauterized lines, like something had seared the flesh from the inside out. And that's what scared them. They set up trail cams, high-end thermal scopes, even night vision drones. Nothing, just forest. But at 2:43 a.m. their perimeter alarm went off, and the footage showed something that never should have been there. A shape, tall, lean, human, but not human, gliding between the trees without touching the ground. And when they played it back, the file corrupted right at the frame where it got closest to the lens. Kyle said they heard whispers all night, like voices arguing in a language that sounded like English but didn't make any damn sense. The next morning, Matthew was gone. His boots were still at the fire ring. His flashlight was still on, still rolling gently in the pine needles, but he was nowhere, not a trace. They never found his body. What makes October in California so dangerous for RV campers isn't just the dryness of the trees or the random lightning storms, it's that the forest gets hungry. The native tribes who lived in the Sierra foothills knew this. They never camped during the black moon. Said the earth opened then, said old things came back up from where they were buried. Not in the soil, but in time. Kyle said he didn't believe it either, not until Julie started sleepwalking into the woods 3 nights after Matthew vanished. He'd have lost her too if he hadn't chained her to the axle of his pickup that night. And even then, she didn't wake up for 6 hours. When she did, she kept whispering the same phrase over and over. "Not the fire. Not the fire. It's under the ash." I've heard a lot of ghost stories around campfires. People love to scare each other out there. But Kyle's story wasn't designed to scare. It was meant to warn. And what stuck with me wasn't the specifics of what he saw or didn't see. It was the timeline. That particular week, that phase of the moon, that part of California. And more than that, it was the way the forest seemed to know who didn't belong there and made sure they never left. I camped that night with one eye open. The next morning, Kyle was gone, left no tire marks, no boot prints, not even an impression where he'd sat by the fire. It was like the land had folded back over him, like the warning was his penance. Maybe he was still trying to save people the way he couldn't save his brother, or maybe I'd imagined it all. But when I checked my dash cam later, there was one clip, 3 minutes long, where the footage blinked to static, right at 2:43 a.m. I didn't stay a second night, but that trip haunted me. Not just because of what Kyle had said, but because once you hear a story like that, you start to notice things, tiny things, like why some campgrounds close earlier than others in the fall, or why locals refuse to talk about missing persons cases in certain counties. You start reading between the lines of Park Service reports. Severe weather exposure, got lost off trail, presumed drowned. But then you look at the weather data and the GPS logs, and none of it adds up. The people weren't unprepared. They were just unlucky. Or they chose the wrong week, the wrong campsite, the wrong time. And sometimes all it takes is one wrong night. I went back months later, not to that exact site, but close. I needed to know, needed to test it, even if part of me hated myself for doing it. I brought gear, radios, flares, sat phone, but nothing can prepare you for the feeling of wrongness that creeps in once the sun goes down in the deep woods of California during fire season. It's not just the crackle of brush or the far-off howl that sounds a little too rhythmic. It's the way your body tightens with every breath. The way the shadows seem to lag behind your movements. The way your dog won't go near the tree line after 10 p.m. That night, I heard something outside. Not footsteps. Not animals. It was the kind of sound that doesn't make sense. A sound like wind whistling through something hollow and metallic, except there was no wind, no trees moving. Just stillness. Oppressive. Thick, like sound trying to move through molasses. And then came the smell, burnt ozone. Electrical, like a lightning strike with no storm. I didn't wait for more. I drove all night. Didn't stop until I hit the city limits of Redding. My hands didn't stop shaking for hours. And when I looked at the dash cam footage the next day, same thing. A blank section from 2:42 to 2:45 a.m., just static. Then it came back on like nothing had happened. I didn't talk about that trip for a long time. Not to friends, not to my partner, not even to the other folks I met on the road, those of us who shared RV stories over propane stoves and lukewarm beer. Because out there, there's a code. You can laugh about bear attacks and bad hookups, but you don't speak about the things that watch you from behind trees, especially when you're alone. You don't say out loud that sometimes you feel like the forest wants you to get lost, that it waits, that it remembers who walks into it, and whether they came with respect or not. But one day I met someone who did talk. Her name was Elena Vargas. Mid-30s, traveling solo in a vintage Airstream, she restored herself. Used to be a nurse, burned out during the pandemic, and took off into the wild to find her center again. She looked calm, resilient, grounded, sharp. Not someone you'd peg as easily spooked. But the moment I mentioned camping near the Feather River during the Black Moon, she froze. Her coffee cup rattled against the edge of the table. She didn't even blink. "You saw the man with no face," she whispered. Not a question. A statement. That's when I knew I wasn't crazy. Elena had parked along a Forest Service road not far from where Kyle told me his story. She didn't know anything about the moon phases, didn't grow up in the area, just figured she'd found a beautiful, quiet spot where she could be alone with her grief. But that first night, something knocked on her Airstream door at exactly 3 a.m. Not loud, just a gentle tap. 3 times. Then silence. She thought it was a raccoon, or maybe some drunk teenagers. She peeked through the window. Nobody. The next night it happened again. 3 taps. Same time. But this time when she stepped outside, She saw him. She said he wasn't really there the way we are, more like a suggestion of a person, a figure carved out of shadow and smoke, tall and narrow with no face, just a blur where the features should have been, and where his eyes might have been, there were points of dull red glow, not shining, not bright, just present, watching. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She did the only thing her instincts could manage. She closed the door and sat with her back against it until dawn. No footsteps, no sound of retreat. But she said she felt him there the whole time, like the airstream had become a pressurized can, and something was trying to suck the air out through the seams. The only thing that broke the pressure was sunlight. As soon as it lit the tips of the trees, the weight lifted. She left that morning, didn't even retract the awning, and yet she stayed on the road, kept camping, kept living out there. You don't run from it, she told me. You listen. You learn what not to do, what times not to camp. There are rules out here, even if no one writes them down. It reminded me of something I once read in a dusty ranger station near Sequoia, scribbled in pencil on the back of a weather log. Respect what you can't explain. Fear is how the forest teaches. That line sat with me, still does, because the longer you RV camp in California, the more you realize how little control you have. Not just over the weather or the terrain, but over the stories the land holds. We like to think we're explorers, adventurers, pioneers of freedom. But the truth is, the wilderness doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't reward your confidence. It humbles you, and sometimes it tests you. With fire, with wind, with the kind of silence that feels like it's waiting for you to speak first so it can judge the sound of your voice. And every October, during those weeks when the moon goes dark, I don't camp anymore. Not even in populated sites. Not even in RV parks near the coast. Because I've learned that the most dangerous time to RV camp in California has nothing to do with crowds or climate. It has to do with attention. When the land turns inward. When things beneath the surface stir and stretch and remember. When the veil between what is and what was becomes thin enough to breathe through. That's when campers vanish. That's when machines fail. That's when fire becomes a signal, not just a hazard. One man I met in a Salinas campground said he once saw a column of smoke rise out of dry brush during a fire ban. No lightning, no heat, no spark, just a cold curl of smoke like incense, and when he walked toward it, it disappeared. 3 hours later, a woman from the next site over was gone. Left her phone, her keys, her baby in the crib, vanished between 1 minute and the next. When they searched for her, all they found was a footprint in the dust, with toes pointing in both directions, as if she'd been standing still and turned to face herself. And when the Rangers wrote the report, probable disorientation. Subject fled terrain. But she didn't flee. Her shoes were still beside the door. I don't tell you this to scare you. I tell you this because fear has a purpose. Fear is a compass. It points away from arrogance and toward caution. It reminds you to close the door before dark, to check the date, to pay attention to the moon. If you want to RV camp in California, truly camp under the redwoods in the chaparral beside lakes older than memory, then you need to understand something. This land is older than the roads that crisscross it. It is older than the state, older than names. And every so often, it reaches out with a hand made of wind and shadow and says, "You're not supposed to be here. Not now." And when it does, you listen. Because the ones who don't listen, they become stories. They become warnings etched into tree bark and photographs stapled to trailhead posts and whispers around the campfire that start with, "There was this one guy." But they don't get to tell their stories anymore because they camped at the wrong time, because they thought they were immune, because they thought the danger was physical, rivers, cliffs, fires, and forgot that time itself is a terrain and it too can collapse beneath your feet. I keep a list now, not of names, but of dates. Times when the forest felt too quiet, when strangers looked too pale, when my dog wouldn't leave the RV, no matter how many times I called. That list tells me when not to go, and so far, it's kept me alive. But that doesn't mean I sleep easy. It just means I sleep aware. You start to see things differently after enough nights in the California backcountry. Your priorities change. You stop chasing the best view, the perfect Instagram shot, the quietest spot off the grid. Instead, you start asking quieter questions. How long has this site been here? What kind of trees grow nearby? Do the birds go silent at sunset? You learn to read the language of the land. Not just in maps and elevation charts, but in the rhythm of the wind through the pines, the way a fire crackles, or the way your engine hesitates to start even though the battery's fine. I remember one night, in a place north of Big Sur, so remote the GPS gave up 20 miles before I arrived. The air smelled like salt and sage, and the cliffs dropped so steeply to the ocean below that the clouds looked like they were rising, not falling. I thought I'd found paradise. But paradise never feels that cold. At around midnight, the fog rolled in, but it wasn't the kind of fog that creeps gently. It rushed, like it had purpose, like it was chasing something. Within seconds, I couldn't see the trees, couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I closed the RV door and shut every blind, every window, and then I heard it. A knock, not at the door, at the back window. Just one, soft, measured, like someone wanted to make sure I knew they were there, but wasn't in a hurry. I didn't move, I didn't breathe, I listened. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Then a second knock, this time at the side door. Same tone, same rhythm, like they were circling, not trying to get in, just letting me know they could. When I finally opened the blinds at dawn, there was nothing. No tracks, no smudges, no signs of life. Except one thing. The back tire on the driver's side had been cleanly slashed. No tear, no puncture, just a slit, like it had been cut with a scalpel. I don't remember falling asleep, but I do remember what I dreamt. A field of burned trees, and between them, hundreds of people, standing silently, their mouths covered with ash, their eyes glowing faint red, all looking west, not at me, not at anything visible, just west, like something was coming, or had already come and passed through them. I drove the RV on the rim until I could limp it back to pavement. Took me hours. And I didn't stop to eat, didn't stop to drink, didn't stop to think. I just drove. That's what California will do to you when it's not the right time. It will make you flee like your life depends on it, because sometimes it does. There's an arrogance baked into RV culture that nobody wants to talk about. This idea that because we have air conditioning, GPS, solar panels, and a satellite dish, we're immune to the old dangers, that we're safe inside fiberglass and tin. But no technology can protect you from the places that live in a different time than you, that breathe differently, that wake up only when the moon forgets to shine. I've spoken to rangers who've seen things they'll never report. A fire tower operator who watched the stars blink out one by one, not behind clouds, but like they'd been erased. A volunteer who found a campsite neatly packed, fire pit cold, food sealed in containers, but no trace of the couple who signed in, no signs of departure. Even the footprints stopped mid-stride. No animals, no struggle, just absence. And then there's the sound. That low droning hum that some people hear just before everything goes wrong. Not loud, not painful, just persistent. Like tinnitus tuned to the wrong station. People who've heard it describe it the same way, like the trees are singing but the melody is broken, off-key, like something pretending to be nature, something close but not quite right. The truth is, most people who RV camp will never encounter any of this. They'll have beautiful trips, roast marshmallows, and post photos of sunsets without ever suspecting the edge they walked so close to. But some of us, we find the cracks. We feel them. And once you do, you can't unfeel them. You can't go back to thinking the forest is just trees and dirt and wind, because it's not. It's alive. And not everything alive wants to be seen. I keep camping. I keep moving. Because part of me believes that if I keep listening, I might learn the full story, might understand what the land is trying to say. But I also know the price of not listening. I've seen it. In the missing posters stapled to gas station corkboards, in the weird messages scratched into picnic tables, in the eyes of people who've seen too much and say too little. There's a saying among the old-timers who boondock deep in the hills, the land always gives you one warning. Just one. Sometimes it's a shadow, sometimes it's an animal that acts strange. Sometimes it's your own body, a sudden nosebleed, a dizzy spell, a migraine that splits your vision in two. Whatever it is, you heed it. You pack. You leave. You don't ask questions, because if you wait for a second warning, you won't get it. You'll just get silence. And in California, especially in the fall, silence doesn't mean safety. It means you've been noticed. There's a certain loneliness that sets in after all of this. Not the kind you feel when you're physically alone, but the kind that comes when you realize not everyone is meant to understand what you've seen. You return to the world of highways and rest stops, of grocery stores and polite small talk at RV parks, but part of you never comes back. You carry something with you, not trauma exactly, not even fear, but awareness, an alertness that never shuts off, a muscle that never relaxes, and you start to recognize others like you. You spot it in the eyes of a man who parks too close to the trailhead but never goes hiking, in the woman who burns sage before every camp setup and talks to the trees as she levels her RV, in the old veteran with the silver beard who double bolts his door even in daylight. You recognize each other by your silences, the way you scan the sky at dusk, the way you know when not to ask where someone's headed next. Because once you know what California's wilderness can be, not just beautiful, not just deadly, but aware, you stop treating your travels like a vacation. You stop thinking of your rig as a shield. You start to see the forest not as a backdrop for your memories, but as an ancient presence that chooses whether you're allowed to leave. There was a moment not too long ago when I almost gave it all up. After a storm near Lassen that flattened trees in a perfect spiral around my RV, no wind reports, no seismic activity, just 30 dead pines forming a circle around me while I slept, I nearly drove straight to the nearest city and sold the whole rig. Trade freedom for safety, for comfort, for something that didn't feel like living on a threshold. But I didn't, because there's something else the land gives you if you survive long enough, something nobody talks about because it's not easy to name. It's not peace, it's not power, it's not even clarity. It's presence, the kind that burns away distraction, the kind that sharpens your soul, the kind that makes you feel real. Out there, you don't have the luxury of noise. You have to listen to the weather, to your instincts, to the hum in the trees, to the space between every knock. And that presence, that gift, it's earned. Paid for in nights of fear, in cold mornings with dead batteries, in moments when you stare into the woods and feel them staring back. That presence makes you respect your limits. It makes you humble. It reminds you that not everything is meant to be conquered. Some things are only meant to be survived. So yes, the most dangerous time to RV camp in California isn't about the weather or the fire season or the crowd level. It's about the timing, the tone of the land. The unspoken warnings etched into the air, and the danger isn't just to your body, it's to your sanity, your certainty, your sense of self. If you camp at the wrong time, the land doesn't just test you, it changes you. Not into something worse, but into something older, quieter, more aware, like a mirror that's seen too much and no longer reflects the face you expect. So if you're thinking about heading out, if you're prepping your route, checking your gear, mapping out the coastlines and cliffs, listen to me. Check the moon phase. Read the old stories. Look for the gaps in the map where the land has no name. And when you pull off the road into some perfect clearing and the wind goes still and the silence folds in like a closing hand, pay attention. Because maybe that spot isn't empty by chance. Maybe it's waiting. Maybe it's always been waiting. And maybe, just maybe, this is your one warning. Don't ignore it. Not here. Not now. Not in California. You think you know the land until it swallows you. You think the stars in a Texas sky are guiding lights until they blink out, one by one, behind something you can't name. Something that moves without sound just outside your reach. Most people pack their RVs and head south believing the warmth will protect them, that big skies mean wide safety. But the truth is, Texas hides things. It always has. And if you don't respect the land, if you don't respect its history and its hunger, it'll show you what you forgot to fear. We were just three of us that spring. Me, Logan, and Mira. I was 41. Logan, a retired paramedic, was 53 and had seen death in its rawest form, or so he thought. Mira was 32, all heart and fire, always the one to laugh first and scream last. We'd driven from Colorado down to the southern fringe of the hill country, following whispers of forgotten rivers and ghost campgrounds that never made it into guidebooks. Mira had read about a spot locals didn't advertise, near a place called Devil's Fork, just past the Brazos River, but before the land turns to oil and shadow. We should have known from the name alone. We rolled in at dusk, and the air felt still, not quiet, still, like sound didn't quite travel right. Logan's dogs, always first out of the RV, didn't bark. They just stood at the door, ears pinned back, refusing to move until Mira coaxed them out with a piece of jerky. Even then, they stayed within 6 feet of the rig all night. Something in them already knew. The first thing that hit me was how wrong the wind was. It didn't rustle through the trees. It circled low, hugging the ground like it was sniffing, hunting. There were no birds, no bugs, no chirp of frogs, just the crackle of our small campfire and the distant groan of something deep beneath the earth. The land was scarred here. Not obviously, not like some war zone. But if you knew how to look, if you knew how to read the lay of dirt and stone, it was clear. Trees leaned away from a dry riverbed that shouldn't have been dry. Fences around nothing. A sunken patch of earth that smelled faintly metallic. That night, Logan poured bourbon and told stories about burn victims and car crashes like he always did when the silence got too heavy. Mira and I laughed along, but our eyes kept darting back toward the tree line. It felt watched, not just looked at, watched. Like something with memory and judgment sat in those woods, remembering all the people who'd stepped too far in. The first scream came just after midnight. Sharp, high, human. Logan dropped his glass. The dogs were up in an instant, snarling and backing into the RV. Mira grabbed a flashlight and scanned the dark. Nothing. Just pine and scrub and blackness so deep it seemed to press against the beam like it wanted to eat the light. Then came the second scream. Closer. This time it ended in a gurgle. We're not idiots. We're not the kind of people who go running towards screams with no plan. Logan grabbed his Glock. I grabbed the flare gun. Mira loaded the dogs into the rig and started the engine. The plan was to leave. It should have been that simple, but the RV didn't move. Not a mechanical issue, not a battery, not even a dead starter. It just didn't move like the wheels were glued to the earth. And then came the knocking. Not at the door, not on the windows, underneath. 3 knocks, slow, hollow, from beneath the RV floor. We froze. The dogs whimpered and tried to crawl under the seats. Mira screamed, first time I ever heard her scream like that, and Logan aimed at the floor, finger twitching. I dropped to my knees and pressed my ear to the vinyl. Nothing, just my own heartbeat and a low hum like a distant generator. But we weren't near any other campers. There weren't supposed to be any. That was the whole point of Devil's Fork, off-grid, unmarked, untouched. And something was very, very wrong. Logan wanted to go out, said we couldn't just sit there all night, said the screams might have come from people who needed help. Mira begged him not to go. I told him we stay together, period. That was always the rule. Nobody walks alone, ever. He agreed. We locked the RV from the inside, drew every curtain, killed every light, but we forgot about the skylight. We didn't even notice until the stars disappeared above us. All at once. Not clouds, not weather, just gone. A shape hovered over the RV, blocking out every pinpoint of light, no sound, no movement, just weight. It was like the sky had lowered itself, pressing down like it wanted inside. And then the screaming started again, this time from all sides. Too many voices, too fast, too overlapping, like someone had taken hundreds of screams and mashed them together like a broken recording of human agony, looping around the RV, circling us like vultures, and then silence. Dead, crushing silence. We stayed like that until dawn. Not a wink of sleep. Just sitting, trembling, weapons in hand, waiting. As the first gray light of morning broke through the trees, we finally stepped out, and what we saw made us question everything. Around the RV were prints, deep impressions in the dirt. Not boot prints, not animal tracks. Hands. Hundreds of hands pressed into the soil, fingers splayed, some tiny like a child's, some grotesquely large, as if whatever left them had never been human. They circled us. They reached toward the tires. They touched the rear ladder. They clawed at the ground beneath where we'd parked. Logan looked like he was going to vomit. Mira just collapsed into the grass and cried. I took pictures. I don't know why. Maybe to prove to myself later that I wasn't insane. Maybe to prove something had touched us and we survived. We didn't speak much as we packed. No one made coffee. No one ate. Just loaded the rig and peeled out of that hellhole with dirt still caked on the tires and screams still echoing in our ears. A few miles out, I tried to upload the photos. Nothing. Corrupted. Every file, even ones I took days earlier, like something had erased proof, erased the memory from my phone. That's when Logan told us about the old paramedic report he'd once seen back in the 90s, about a missing camper near Brazos whose remains were never found, just a ring of handprints in the dirt and a melted flashlight. It had been dismissed as heat stroke and hysteria. But heat stroke doesn't make you vanish without a trace. We spent the next few days in a KOA with 20 other rigs and the sound of generators humming us to sleep. I used to crave the silence, the solitude, the untouched places. Not anymore. Now I want lights, noise, eyes that can see me, walls that things can't crawl under. Texas taught us a lesson no ranger's handbook ever will. Some places don't want you. And if you ignore that, if you push in anyway, they'll take a piece of you. Maybe more. We thought we could just move on, that we'd left it behind. But that's not how these places work. Not in Texas. You don't just brush against something ancient and hungry and expect it to forget you. The land remembers. It marks you. And even when you leave, it follows in the quiet spaces of your mind, waits for you in the folds of your dreams. 2 weeks later, Logan called me from his home in Amarillo. He hadn't slept, not once. Said the knocking had started again, not under his house, inside it. Beneath the floorboards of his bedroom, same rhythm, 3 knocks, slow, hollow, every night at exactly 2:14 a.m. He thought he was losing it, thought the trip had broken something in him. I wanted to tell him he was fine, that it was just trauma echoing back. But I didn't believe that, and I didn't lie to him, because I'd heard it too. Not in my house, but in the RV, the one I'd parked out back, locked up tight, engine off, untouched since we got home. One night I went out to grab some tools from the garage. The night was calm, the air clean, stars visible above the city haze, and then I heard it. Soft, barely audible, but real. From inside the rig. Knock, knock, knock. I ran. Left the garage lights on. Didn't look back until I was through the door and bolting it behind me. When I finally worked up the nerve to open the RV days later, everything inside was cold. Not just temperature. Wrong. I can't explain it, like the air was dead. Like whatever life had ever existed inside that space had been bled out. I didn't sleep in it again. Couldn't. Mira went silent on us for a while. We figured she just needed space. But Logan found her blog. She'd started writing under a pseudonym, trying to make sense of it all. Pages and pages of strange symbols, handprint sketches, fragments of words she said came to her in dreams. She'd wake up with her hands covered in dirt, even though she hadn't left the house. One entry chilled me worse than anything we'd seen at Devil's Fork. It read, "They don't live in the forest. The forest lives in them, and now it lives in me." I called her that night. No answer. Next morning, I got a single text. "Don't come looking. It's already here." She was gone. Vanished. No activity on her card. Her apartment abandoned. But the neighbors said they'd seen her standing in the backyard at 2 a.m. just staring at the soil, barefoot, unmoving, like she was listening for something. That's the part that keeps me up. the listening, because I've caught myself doing it too. Pausing at night, straining my ears for that knock I pray never comes. It's not about fear anymore. It's not about campfire stories or scary trips gone wrong. It's about truth. And the truth is, Texas holds places that reject civilization. Places that were never meant to be mapped, never meant to be paved or settled or sung about in country songs. These aren't haunted places. Ghosts are simple, predictable. What we felt, what we survived, that was something different. Something older than fear, a consciousness wrapped in soil and bark and bone. A thing that watches, not from trees, but through them. Not from under the earth, but as the earth. It doesn't chase you. It invites you, lures you, makes you think you found something untouched and magical. And then it opens its mouth and you realize it wasn't a forest. It was a trap. I've talked to others since, other campers, quiet types who don't go online and don't want to be filmed. They've seen similar things. A man in Fredericksburg said he found a clearing filled with children's shoes, perfectly arranged in a spiral, not one with a speck of dirt on it. A woman from El Paso claimed her rig disappeared for 12 hours while she was in it, and when it reappeared, the food was rotting and every mirror had shattered from the inside. You won't find this on the tourism boards. You won't hear about it from park rangers. They know. Some of them do, at least, but they've learned not to speak. The land demands silence, and those who talk too much, they vanish, like Mira. Like others we don't even know about. So why tell this story? Because maybe, just maybe, someone like you is out there right now, packing your rig, feeling brave, eager to find something real. I'm not here to stop you. I won't tell you not to go, but I'll beg you to listen, to watch for the signs, the places where trees lean wrong, the rivers that have no sound, the campgrounds that aren't listed on any app. Those places aren't accidents, they're bait. And when you park your rig in a place like that, when you step out into the night and the wind is still and the stars start to blink out, leave. Don't try to reason with it. Don't wait for confirmation. Don't pretend it's just your mind. Drive, even if the tires scream, even if the forest tries to hold you down, even if the knocking starts. Drive. Because once it knows your name, once you hear it say it, whispered in the wind or carved into the mud near your fire, you are marked, not cursed, not possessed, claimed. And that mark, it doesn't wash off. There's a moment every camper faces, usually alone out there in the deep dark, when you realize how thin the walls of an RV really are. It's not a house. It's not even a proper shelter. It's fiberglass and aluminum, a box on wheels. Out there in the places Texas doesn't talk about, your RV might as well be made of paper. When the thing watching you decides it's time, you'll hear everything. Every breath you take, every creak of the frame, every drop of sweat as it falls onto the laminate floor. Because the walls don't protect you. They just keep you from seeing what's already inside. I tried selling the RV. I posted it online with a discount so steep it practically screamed desperation. And it worked for a moment. A couple drove in from Abilene, said they'd been looking for a model like mine. They walked around it once, then asked if they could see the interior. I handed them the keys and stood back, watching through the open side door as they stepped inside. And they stopped, mid-step, mid-sentence, just stopped. The woman froze in the narrow hallway by the bathroom. The man in the kitchenette, silent, eyes wide, not moving. I asked if they were all right. No response. I stepped in, cautiously, trying not to breathe too loud. I felt it immediately. The pressure, the silence. Again, not absence of noise, but the presence of something deeper, like a held breath, like the whole space was leaning inward. And then I heard it, not knocking this time, whispering, faint, low, circular. It wasn't in English, it wasn't in any language I knew, but it was familiar. The way blood knows its own rhythm, the way bone recognizes the soil it came from. I looked back and the couple was already outside, walking fast. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't make eye contact. They didn't ask for a refund. They just got in their truck and peeled off, tires spinning dust into the sunlight. The ad stayed up for another month. No one came after that. No one even messaged me. Eventually, the site pulled it for lack of engagement, but I knew better. Word gets out in ways we can't trace. Sometimes in dreams, sometimes in the breath between words, sometimes in the dirt stuck to the soles of your boots. I started getting letters too. Actual paper letters. No return address, just shaky handwriting in blue ink. Phrases like, the fork is not a place, it's a mouth. Don't dig near the cedars, you'll wake what sleeps. She's under the RV still. It's not over, you only delayed it. Some of them smelled like ash, others like wet clay. One came with a piece of old cloth, brittle and frayed, with 5 small handprints drawn in charcoal. They were too small, not a child's, something else, something less human. I burned it. The smell took 3 weeks to leave the house. I called Logan again. He hadn't answered the past few times, and I was starting to worry. This time he picked up. His voice sounded hollow, like it had to travel a long way just to reach me. He said, I went back. Those words hit me like a sledgehammer. I asked him why, asked him what the hell he was thinking. He just said, I needed answers. Needed to know if it was real, if we imagined it. Then silence. And then I found something. He didn't say what. He didn't describe it. Just that he'd found something beneath the trees where we'd camped. Something buried in shallow ground. Something wrapped in plastic and bone. He said it was whispering to him even now. I never heard from Logan again. Not really. His number works. It rings. But when I answer, it's just static. And once, just once, I swear I heard that rhythm again. 3 knocks. Then the line went dead. You think these stories are just fear dressed up as entertainment, a thrill to carry with you to your next campfire. But I'm telling you, what we touched out there in Texas was not a legend, not a ghost story, not some backwoods superstition. It was real, and it was waiting. It still is. Every time you scroll past a no-name campground on a forgotten road, every time you hear about a spot locals don't talk about, every time you think that sounds exciting, let's try it. Stop. Think. There's a reason no one goes there. A reason it doesn't show up on maps. A reason the last review was 10 years ago, and the user who posted it hasn't been active since. The land has a memory. It knows who disturbed it, and sometimes it answers back. There's a hollow in the earth where sound dies, where your name disappears from search results, where footprints fill in behind you like you were never there. That's where we camped. That's what we invited in. And that's what I'll never do again. So if you're out there, if you're hooking up your rig, plotting your way through Texas, chasing sunsets and ghost towns, don't ignore the feeling in your gut. Don't explain away the silence. Don't dismiss the trees that seem to whisper your name, because it's not in your head. It's in the dirt, it's in the wind. It's in you now. I've changed, and I think you will too, if you stay out there long enough, if you let the wilderness stare back into you for too long. It doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle. First, it's the refusal to park near trees. Then, it's a twitch when the wind knocks against the rig at night. Eventually, you stop opening the blinds altogether. Not because you're afraid of what's out there, but because you know it's already looking in. There's a cost to going too deep. You lose the illusion that you're in control, that the road obeys you, that the GPS means anything at all. You realize Texas isn't just a state. It's a breathing, ancient, unyielding presence that plays by rules older than anything we can chart. And if you listen too close, if you spend just one too many nights in those shadowed hollows, it starts to teach you its language. I don't take new routes anymore. I don't chase off-grid experiences. And when I hear people bragging at rest stops about some hidden spot they found with no signal, no rangers, no traffic, I want to scream. Because I know what those places are. They aren't lost. They're hidden. Hidden for a reason. And they're not empty. There are patterns you'll see if you stay on the road long enough. People go missing in clusters. RVs vanish without wreckage. Trails get closed without explanation. Reports of strange lights or sounds are logged and then quietly scrubbed. But the locals know. The ones who've lived near those woods for generations, they lock their doors before sundown. They don't walk their dogs near the edge. They leave offerings on stumps, small things barely noticeable. A coin, a slice of fruit, a bundle of sage, not because they believe, because they remember. I used to think stories like this were exaggerations, tourist trap tales, but now I understand something deeper. The scariest places in the world aren't abandoned, they're just waiting, and they don't need to chase you. All they have to do is be patient. You'll come to them eventually, out of curiosity, out of defiance, out of a desire to feel something real, and they will be ready. There's a final thing I need to tell you, and it might be the most important part of this entire story. Something I haven't said out loud, not even to Logan or Mira, back when we still spoke. That first night in Devil's Fork, when I went out to the tree line, I didn't just feel watched. I saw something. Only for a second. A shadow that wasn't mine. A shape that didn't belong. It stood just outside the ring of firelight, still as stone, with eyes that didn't glow, but reflected, like the eyes of an animal, except it was tall, wrong, crooked like it had grown in the shape of a scream, and it waved at me. Just once, slowly. I didn't tell the others. Thought I imagined it. Thought it was my mind messing with me. But now I think it was saying hello. Or maybe welcome. So I'll leave you with this. You are not alone out there, not in the way you think. There are roads in Texas that turn in on themselves. Campsites that don't exist on return visits. Whispers in the static of your radio, patterns in the knocks against your rig that match no tree, no creature, no wind. You'll see things. Maybe only once, maybe only from the corner of your eye. But if you do, if your dog growls at nothing, if your fire refuses to light, if the silence feels pressurized, listen to that instinct. Leave. Because if you stay too long, if you ask too many questions, if you forget that the forest isn't your friend, you won't just become a story, you'll become part of the land. And the land doesn't give things back. So camp smart, camp light, trust your gut, trust your dog, and above all, don't ignore the knock. Because the scariest part of RV camping in Texas isn't what you see, it's what remembers you. There's a silence you only hear when you're too far from help, when you're miles from a paved road, when your cell phone blinks no signal, and even your own heartbeat seems too loud against the hush of the trees. That's the silence I chased when I moved into my RV full time. That's the silence I thought I needed to feel alive again. But silence has a way of turning on you. And when it does, it doesn't whisper, it screams. I was 31 when I decided I'd had enough of the city. Enough of rent payments that felt like theft. Enough of gray offices with fluorescent ceilings and lukewarm coffee. I wanted the open road, the freedom people brag about on those over-edited Instagram reels. I bought a used Class C RV from a man who said it had character, which I would later learn was code for several unsolved problems. I packed it with the essentials: food, a solar panel setup, a camp stove, a 38 special my father gave me before he died, and a photo of my sister who never made it to 30. And I left. Just left. At first, it was everything I wanted. I parked under endless skies, cooked meals beside lakes so still they looked like mirrors, and slept beneath stars you can't find unless you're willing to lose cell service. There was peace in it, yes, but it was the kind of peace you only feel before the storm begins. I rolled into the mountains of northern Arizona in early October. A ranger at a gas station warned me that the weather turned quickly there, but I'd grown too confident in my setup. I told myself I knew what I was doing. Pride. That's what makes fools out of all of us. I found a primitive camping spot tucked into the Coconino Forest, down a road barely wide enough for my RV. No hookups, no other campers, no signs of recent human activity. It was perfect. I set up camp around 4 p.m., lit a fire, and made chili from a can. As the sky darkened, I watched the flames flicker and listened to the forest breathe. But somewhere between dusk and full night, that silence I used to cherish began to rot into something else. There's a different kind of quiet out there. It presses against your skin like humidity, but colder, hungrier. I felt watched. And when I stood to look around, I told myself it was just the deer, just coyotes, just wind. At 3:12 a.m., I woke to the sound of gravel crunching, footsteps, not animal, not hurried, just walking. Right past the back of my RV, I froze. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might shake the rig. Then the footsteps stopped. Right outside my door, it was that kind of silence again, thick, electric. And then 3 soft knocks, not loud, not angry, just intentional. I reached for my father's revolver with hands that didn't feel like mine. I waited. I whispered prayers I didn't believe in. No more knocks came, no footsteps walked away, just nothing. When morning broke, I stepped outside slowly, no tracks, no sign of anyone. But there, placed on the fire pit I'd built just hours before, was a bone. Clean, bleached, small. Maybe from a deer, maybe not. I didn't stay to figure it out. I drove out of that forest with the pedal trembling under my foot, back to a real campground with people, noise, and lights. For 3 days, I couldn't sleep without every creak in the RV jolting me upright. I told myself it was some prank, maybe a hiker messing around. But deep down, I knew better. A week later, I parked near the edge of a canyon in Utah, another solo spot. I was trying to reclaim that peace I used to feel. I lit another fire. I cooked another meal. I tried to laugh at my own fear. That's when I found the second bone, this time on my driver's seat when I came back from a hike. That's when I realized something was following me. Not someone. Something. I started seeing flashes of movement just beyond my headlights at night, hearing a voice that sounded like my sister's whispering my name from the trees, smelling smoke even when I hadn't lit a fire. I knew I should go back to civilization, but I also knew it would follow me. So I stayed. I thought if I understood it, maybe I could control it. Maybe I could reason with whatever force had decided I was a good target. I wrote journals, I set up cameras, I left offerings, food, coins, even my own blood once from a cut on my finger. I don't remember doing it, but I remember waking up to find a drop trail leading from the kitchen sink to the forest's edge, and still the knocks came. Always 3. Never louder than they needed to be. Sometimes on the door, sometimes on the windows. Once, right beside my head, on the wall above where I slept. I tried to tell someone, a park ranger near the Nevada border. I was shaking, rambling. She looked at me the way you look at someone you think might be broken beyond repair. She didn't ask questions. She just handed me a flyer for a local church group and told me maybe I needed some company. I haven't seen her since. I checked back 2 weeks later. She wasn't on the schedule. No one knew her name. They said no female rangers were assigned to that station this season. It wasn't just a haunting. It was something older than the places I parked. Something that used the silence of the forest to wrap itself around me. Something that didn't need to hurt me to win. It only had to make me stay. And I stayed far too long. I don't live in the RV anymore. I haven't even stepped inside it since last winter. When I found the final bone, this one shaped like a human finger, set neatly on my pillow. No prints, no blood, just placement. And you might think this is just a ghost story, that I let my loneliness twist into something monstrous, but you don't understand the power of silence until you've lived in it, until you've listened too long, until it starts whispering back. I believed the RV life would save me. I thought freedom lived on 4 wheels. But what I found was a freedom that came with a cost. A freedom that opened doors I should have left shut. A freedom that made me visible to things that hunt people like me, not for what we have, but for what we're missing. You think you know who you are until the dark has you to itself. Then it shows you. And if you're lucky, you come back with enough of yourself to remember what the light feels like. But some don't come back. And some never leave. I tried to rebuild a life after that, but the shadows I left behind didn't forget me. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of Flagstaff, just close enough to civilization to hear sirens and see neighbors' porch lights flicker on at dusk, just far enough that the forest still loomed in the distance like a memory I hadn't buried deep enough. I took a job stocking shelves at a local hardware store. Mundane. Predictable. That was the point. But at night, the nights, it still found me. I'd lie awake and listen to the wind rattle the window panes, half convinced it wasn't the wind at all. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps in the hallway when I was the only tenant on my floor. Sometimes the smell of wood smoke would drift under my door, acrid and wet, the same scent from my RV nights. One evening I found the faucet running in the bathroom. I hadn't used it. The mirror fogged up slowly, and on the glass, 3 long streaks, like someone had dragged their fingers through the condensation. Not words, just a gesture, a mark. 3 lines, like the 3 knocks. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I kept the revolver under my pillow, but the cold metal brought no comfort now. It was like holding a relic from a world I'd left behind, one that couldn't help me anymore. Because the truth is, when something attaches itself to your silence, your emptiness, it doesn't need to touch you. It becomes you, and it waits, patient, eternal. I went back to the RV once, just once. It was still where I left it, covered in a thin film of dust and ash. I unlocked the door, and it creaked open like it had been waiting, like it had missed me. The air inside was still, too still, not stale, not moldy, not metallic, just still as though it hadn't aged a day in my absence, as if it had been preserved by something that didn't respect time. There on the table was a photo I didn't take, a grainy Polaroid. In it, I stood beside my campfire in Arizona, my back turned to the camera. Behind me, in the trees, a tall figure barely visible, half shadow, half smoke. I dropped it, but I didn't need to look again. I knew what it was. I'd felt it. I'd heard it breathing just inches from the canvas windows at night, and now it wanted me to see it, to acknowledge it. I burned the RV that night, drenched it in gasoline, and watched the flames consume everything. My journals, the furniture, the memory of who I used to be. It screamed when it went. Not aloud, not like a voice, but like a pressure in the chest, like something wrenching loose from your rib cage and clawing its way back into the smoke. I watched until the last ember died, and I thought, maybe that was it. Maybe fire could do what prayer couldn't. But I was wrong. Because sometimes I still see it. Not full-bodied, no longer patient, just flashes, reflections in puddles that ripple before I get too close. Shadows that don't belong to anything when I turn around. And those bones, they've started appearing again, in places I can't explain. Once in the trunk of my car, another time on the doorstep of a friend's cabin I visited for the weekend. I never speak about them aloud, I never touch them. But I know they're messages, warnings, or worse, reminders. Because the road doesn't forget you. The silence remembers your name. And once you live alone out there long enough, something ancient finds you. It sees the loneliness, it drinks it in, it curls around it like smoke around flame, and then it waits. If you're reading this, if you're someone like I was, restless, tired of the world, hungry for something pure, you'll think I'm just another voice crying into the void. But I'm not. I'm the echo of a choice you haven't made yet. I'm the voice that should have stopped you before you typed off-grid RV sites near me. I'm the warning before the silence falls. You want freedom? It's out there. No fences, no clocks, no neighbors. But be careful what you call peace, because peace is not always the absence of noise. It can also be the absence of witnesses. And the further you drift from the world of lights and roads and voices, the closer you come to things that don't need introductions. They don't need reasons. They don't need to hate you. They just need you alone. I haven't left my apartment in 3 weeks. I keep the blinds shut. I keep the lights on. I keep music playing low always, even when I sleep. Because I know what comes when it's too quiet. I know what visits. I've tried everything. Salt lines, cameras. I even saw a priest. He wouldn't step inside. He said there was something here, something old. He didn't charge me. Just said, whatever it is, it's not bound to the land. It's bound to you. I asked him how to get rid of it. He didn't answer, and when I turned to thank him, he was already walking away. I never saw him again. Sometimes I wonder if I made the whole thing up, if it's all just trauma, unresolved grief, a mind that cracked open a little too wide and let the dark leak in. But then I hear it again. 3 knocks. Always 3. Always from the far corner of the room where the shadows pool too thick. And I remember. I remember the bone, the fire, the silence. I remember who I became out there. I remember that the road never really ends. It just circles back. And maybe, just maybe, so does whatever followed me. There's something no one tells you about being truly alone. At some point, you stop being afraid of death and start being afraid of continuance, of waking up another day with that thing still near, still watching, still reminding you that you're no longer the same person who started this journey. You become a passenger in your own life, with the sense that your soul is slowly being siphoned off in moments you can't remember losing. I've tried to map it, this madness, this presence, this silent intruder that waits behind doors I can no longer close. I've drawn circles on maps, tracked every location where something strange occurred, hoping I might find a pattern, a logic, a boundary. But there is no pattern, no rules, no coordinates that define where it begins or ends. It doesn't obey nature. It doesn't honor faith. It just is. I met others, eventually, people like me, survivors. Not many, but enough to know I'm not alone in this. A woman in Montana who stopped using her name after her RV broke down, and the forest around her began calling it in a voice that matched her mother's. A former soldier in Texas who hears his squad's final radio call every time he camps alone. A man who burned down 3 trailers in 3 different states, trying to escape a shadow that always returns. We don't talk often, we don't meet in person, but we understand one another in a way no one else can. We call ourselves the still marked. That's the best word we found for it. Still marked. Not cursed, not haunted, just marked by the stillness, changed by it, bound to the silence in a way you don't feel until you're trying to scream, and nothing comes out. I write this now not because I think it will save me, but because maybe it will save you. The one getting ready to chase freedom, to cash out your savings, buy that RV, and drive into the wild with nothing but a tank of gas and a hunger for meaning. I understand you. I was you. And I'm not here to tell you not to go. I'm here to tell you that if you do, go with your eyes wide open. Go with more than dreams. Go with anchors. People who will check on you, places that will tether you back when the quiet starts to feel too heavy. Because if you don't, the quiet will take you. It doesn't always kill you. Sometimes it does something worse. It empties you. I keep a notebook now. Nothing fancy. Leather-bound, thick pages. I write in it every day, even when I don't want to. Even when my hands tremble too hard to hold the pen straight. I write what I remember, and sometimes I write what I don't. Dreams that feel like memories. Memories that feel like someone else's dreams. I once wrote a sentence I don't remember writing. We are not meant to dwell where no one listens. I don't know where it came from. I don't know what it means, but it chills me to read it. Because that's the key, isn't it? Listening, witnessing, presence. I think whatever followed me survives on isolation. I think it feeds on the parts of us we hide even from ourselves. And when you live alone long enough, really alone, in the deep woods, on forgotten roads, in campgrounds no longer on any map, you become less of a person and more of a vessel, an echo chamber for something older than fear. People don't believe you when you tell them. They nod, they pity, they think it's trauma or stress or a mental break. And maybe some of it is, but not all of it. Because trauma doesn't leave bones on your dashboard. Hallucinations don't knock 3 times at exactly 2 or 3 a.m. every week, no matter where you are. Nightmares don't whisper your name in your father's voice, don't hum the lullaby your sister used to sing before she died. No, this is different. This is real. And the worst part? The part I can barely bring myself to write? Sometimes I miss it. I miss the firelight, the wind, the sense that I was part of something larger. I miss the freedom, the stillness before I knew it was poisoned. I miss the way the forest made me feel like a child again, small, curious, in awe. Even now, sometimes I hear the call of the road late at night and feel tempted to answer it, to step back out there and ask the darkness what else it has to show me, but I won't. Because I know what's waiting, and I know it never truly let go. I've learned to live with it like you live with a scar that no one can see. I've learned to speak above it, to fill the room with sound, with life, with the kinds of noise that keep it at bay. But I also know that one day I might slip, I might take a wrong turn, I might camp a little too far, stay a little too long, go just a little too quiet, and then it will return. 3 knocks, no more, no less. And the silence will wrap around me again like it never left. Because once you're marked by the stillness, once the road takes your name, there's no going back to who you were, only forward, only deeper, only quieter. So if you're listening to this, if you're parked right now in some remote site with your fire dwindling and your phone dead, if the trees have gone a little too still, if you haven't heard a bird in hours, listen, not with your ears, with your soul. And if you hear nothing, get in your RV, turn the key, drive, don't look back, because what's waiting in the silence isn't gone. It's waiting for you to stop moving. And when you do, it knocks. They say the silence in Alaska can be beautiful, but what they never tell you is how quickly that silence can turn on you, how it can become something hollow and haunting, how it echoes not just through the forests, but inside your bones, deep in the spaces where fear likes to hide. I'd never been afraid of the wild before. I grew up chasing the sound of coyotes at night, sleeping in tents under endless skies, and fixing busted transmissions with my dad in the middle of nowhere. But that summer, June of last year, I made a mistake, a big one. I thought Alaska would be just another check on my bucket list, a rugged postcard brought to life, some scenic glacier vistas, and a few black bear sightings from a distance. I wasn't prepared for the truth. The truth is that in Alaska, the wilderness doesn't care how experienced you are. It doesn't care about your maps, your Wi-Fi boosters, or your sense of adventure. It only cares if you're paying attention, because if you're not, it will swallow you whole. I was traveling solo, 37 years old, divorced, still finding ways to patch together my pride with miles and memories. My RV, a 2012 Winnebago I named Maggie, had carried me through Arizona dust storms, Montana's blizzards, and the eerie flatness of the Dakotas, but nothing had felt quite as remote, as fundamentally other, as the stretch of wilderness I encountered in central Alaska. It started outside of a town called Talkeetna, this strange little pocket of wilderness halfway between Anchorage and Denali. I'd been parked at a campsite that wasn't exactly on any official campground listing, one of those word-of-mouth places where hunters, hikers, and deep woods loners tend to gather during off-peak weeks. There were 5 RVs total. 2 looked like they hadn't moved in years. Mine was the newest, and even Maggie was showing signs of her age. The people around me were quiet. Too quiet. No kids. No dogs. Just older men mostly, grizzled, heads down. The kind of folks who used to something most others never see. Something they never talk about. Not unless they trust you. Not unless they think you're staying. The first night, I thought I heard wind, that high-pitched whistling kind that creeps through trees and RV vents alike. But by 2 a.m., it had turned into something else. A rhythm, a clicking sound. Slow, deliberate. It came from the tree line. I stepped out of Maggie, barefoot, holding a flashlight, heart pounding like I was 16 again, daring something unseen to make me believe. But there was nothing, no movement, no animal eyes reflecting in the beam, just cold air, thick with pine and an odd, coppery scent that reminded me of pennies and gunmetal. The next morning, I asked the man camped 3 spots down, a Vietnam vet named Ross, if he'd heard anything. He looked up from sharpening his hunting knife, stared at me for a long second, then said, "This place got stories, man. Sometimes it's better not to listen too hard." Then he went back to his blade like he hadn't said anything at all. Still, I stayed. I shouldn't have. By day 3, the forest felt wrong. Like you don't realize how much your body responds to space until space itself turns against you. The light was off, not just dim but filtered, like everything was being seen through old glass. The birds, which had chirped constantly when I first arrived, went dead quiet. Not a single flutter, not even crows. And the animals, the ones we'd spotted the first day, were just gone. Like the land had swallowed them, or they'd fled in a silent panic. That night, it came again. The clicking was louder now, not outside the tree line, but near my RV door. I froze, breath caught in my throat like a fish on a line. My hand hovered over the lock button. Maggie's interior lights flickered just once. Then silence again. I couldn't sleep. I stayed up, flashlight in one hand, bear spray in the other, staring at that door until morning. And still, I stayed. Because I was stubborn. Because I didn't want to admit I was scared. Because somewhere deep down, I still believed in the power of reason, that everything could be explained. But Alaska doesn't care about reason. It chews it up. The fifth night, everything broke. Around midnight, the temperature dropped 20 degrees in less than 5 minutes. My windows fogged, inside and out. The clicking returned, but now it wasn't alone. There was a sound behind it, a low guttural hum, like a voice not made for human throats. My stomach turned. Something tapped on the back window. Not a knock, a scrape like nails on fiberglass. Then again on the side. Then the RV rocked. I yelled. I don't even remember what I said. I hit the headlights. I slammed the horn. Nothing. By the time I grabbed my keys, threw on boots, and burst out the front door, there was no one there. No prints in the frost. No sound of retreat. Just the forest, still and patient, watching me like a wolf watches a wounded elk. I ran to Ross's RV, banged on the side. No answer. When I opened the door, the inside was empty. No bags, no supplies, just a burnt-out lantern and the faint smell of ammonia. The other campers? Gone. RVs abandoned. Lights off. It was like I'd missed an evacuation no one told me about. I knew I had to leave, but Maggie wouldn't start. That's when I saw it. Movement in the rearview mirror. Just a blur. A tall shape. Too tall. No eyes, no face, just the vague outline of something not meant to walk upright. My limbs turned to stone. I don't remember turning the key, but suddenly Maggie sputtered, then roared to life like she understood. I floored it. Didn't look back. Didn't stop until I hit the outskirts of Wasilla, nearly 200 miles away. When I finally stopped to refuel and breathe, I found scratches along the RV's exterior. Deep ones. Not from branches. From something with hands. Even now, I try to rationalize it. Maybe it was a moose, a bear, someone playing a prank. But no bear scrapes like that. No human disappears into thin air, and no animal I've ever known carries a sound like that in its chest. People always talk about Alaska like it's the last frontier, but what they don't tell you is that some frontiers were never meant to be crossed. Some places remain wild for a reason. They keep their stories buried beneath moss and permafrost, waiting for the arrogant or the curious to come uninvited. I was both, and I paid the price. I didn't go straight home after that. I couldn't. Something about crossing the border back into the lower 48 made me feel like I needed to shake off whatever had followed me, whatever I might have carried away, whether on the tires or in my mind. I stayed a night in British Columbia at a well-lit roadside RV park. Clean showers, families grilling dinner, a group of teenagers throwing a frisbee nearby. Everything should have felt safe again. But when I lay down that night, I couldn't close my eyes without seeing that shadow behind me. The tall thing, the silent thing, and worse, I kept hearing that clicking, not outside, from inside the RV. That sound never fully left me. Even now, sometimes in the quiet hum of the AC, in the tick of the engine cooling down after a long drive, I swear it creeps back in. And when it does, I sit up, listening, my hand wrapped tight around a flashlight I haven't put away in almost a year. Because when something touches the boundary of your known world, when something looks at you and doesn't blink, doesn't breathe, just waits, you don't go back to normal. You learn to live sideways. You learn to glance twice in mirrors. You learn the quiet isn't always your friend. But I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. Not my sister. Not my friends back in Arizona. What do you say, anyway? Hey, I went on an RV trip and something invisible tried to tear my camper open in the middle of the Alaskan woods. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to believe it. The people who love you just want you to be okay. They want to laugh and clink glasses and maybe ask what the northern lights looked like. I started talking to other campers online, forums, private threads, those buried pages where people trade truths like currency. That's where I found others who'd been to Talkeetna, who'd seen the forest shift the way I did, who'd heard that same clicking. Some of them made it out. Some of them didn't come back at all. And some posted once, and then their accounts went quiet, deleted, disappeared. People shrugged and moved on, but not me. That's when I realized we only survive the unknown when we tell its stories. I had to talk about it, not to scare people off from camping. Not at all. If anything, I believe in the beauty of this land more than ever. But it's not beauty without teeth. It's not adventure without risk. And if we don't learn to respect it, we end up like Ross, ghosts in our own last chapters, warnings without names. Since that trip, I've changed the way I travel. I research more. I double-check maps. I don't boondock alone without a backup plan. And I never ignore my instincts. If a place feels wrong, I leave. If the forest is too quiet, I don't wait for it to speak. And I no longer believe that solitude is always strength. There is courage in company, in community, because sometimes the woods don't want you alone for no reason. Sometimes alone is exactly how they need you to reach you. I've met a few people since then who've had similar encounters in other parts of the country. Remote pockets in the Pacific Northwest, strange valleys in Utah, and one man I met at a repair shop in Colorado who couldn't stop staring at the mountains behind him like they still had part of him trapped up there. We talked for hours. He never said the word, but I could feel it on his breath. Fear, the kind that stays, the kind that reshapes your bones. That's the thing no one warns you about. Not the travel brochures, not the park rangers, not the YouTube channels with drone footage and cheerful theme music. They don't tell you that some places aren't haunted by ghosts, they're haunted by something older. Something that doesn't leave traces you can track, something that waits for you to forget it exists, something that doesn't speak your language but still knows your name. Sometimes I think about going back, just to prove to myself it was real, just to stare it down and show it I'm not afraid anymore. But that's the lie I tell myself. I am afraid, and I should be. Because whatever that thing was, it didn't need to chase me. It didn't need to scream or roar or run. All it did was watch. All it did was let me know I was being watched, that I wasn't welcome, that it could come closer if it wanted, and maybe one day it will. For now, I stay to the highways. I stick to campsites where there's laughter and light and the smell of charcoal in the air. I wave to other travelers, I share maps and warnings, and I keep Maggie in good shape. Because I've learned that the most dangerous thing about RV camping isn't the weather or the wildlife. It's the false sense of safety we bring with us. We think because we're rolling in on 4 wheels and a generator that we're untouchable, that nature owes us hospitality, that the rules of suburbia still apply beneath the spruce trees and the tundra sky. But nature doesn't owe you anything. If you step out there, it's on you to listen, to feel, to know when to go silent, to know when to leave, and to never, ever assume you're alone just because you can't see what's there. I used to believe the road would heal everything, that if I drove far enough, fast enough, long enough, the pain would stay behind me. Divorce, debt, the job that never really felt like mine. I thought if I kept my hands on the wheel and my eyes on the next horizon, the past couldn't reach me. But Alaska taught me that the road doesn't always lead you away from things. Sometimes it leads you straight into the heart of what you've been trying to outrun. When I left Talkeetna behind, I didn't just drive through a stretch of land, I crossed a threshold I didn't even know existed. Something in me changed. I felt it in the way I watched the tree lines, in how I hesitated before pulling into any new site. I felt it in the way I read people too. I could tell now when someone had seen something they couldn't explain. It was in their silence, the way their eyes lingered just a beat too long on the shadows between trees, the way their smiles felt heavy, like they were trying to convince themselves that normal still existed. There was one man I met down in Oregon a few months after. His name was Cal. Mid-60s, ex-trucker turned full-time RVer. We ended up camped next to each other for 3 days in a state park. Shared a few drinks, traded stories. I never told him what happened in Alaska, but on the last night, he looked out over the fire and said, "You ever feel like something out there's keeping track of us? Like we're just part of some pattern?" I nodded. I didn't have to say anything else. We understood each other. Some things don't need to be spoken out loud to be real. They live in the spaces between words, in the tension between breaths. Cal said he once parked overnight off a forest road in Idaho and woke up to find his door wide open, even though he remembered locking it. Nothing was missing, nothing disturbed, just open. Like something wanted me to know it could, he said. We don't talk about those moments often, not even among fellow campers. The culture of RV life is built on freedom, resilience, independence. There's no room in the brochure for things that can't be fixed with duct tape and optimism. But the truth is, there's a quiet dread that runs just beneath the surface of the lifestyle. And once you've brushed up against it, once you've looked it in the face, whatever it is, it never truly lets go. I tried to find logical explanations for what happened to me. Maybe the elevation played tricks on my senses, maybe the cold got into my head, maybe sleep deprivation warped the sounds I heard. But deep down, I know better. The scratches weren't in my mind. The figures weren't hallucinations. And that suffocating sense of being watched, of being weighed and measured by something unseen, you don't make that up. Your body doesn't lie to you like that. That's what I want other campers to know. You can prepare for flat tires, for bad weather, for the occasional bear or raccoon raiding your cooler, but you also need to prepare for the invisible things, the ones that don't show up on trail cameras or campground checklists, the ones that live in folklore, in whispers around late-night campfires, in the pauses when, people talk about certain places. You have to listen for those pauses. You have to respect them. After Alaska, I changed how I plan my trips. I read more local legends. I look up tribal histories and forgotten trails. I started talking to indigenous park rangers, not just the ones who give you maps at the visitor center, but the ones who've been there, whose ancestors knew the land long before the pavement showed up. And more often than not, they've nodded when I described what I saw. Not surprised, not alarmed, just sad. One woman, a ranger near the Yukon River, told me something I've never forgotten. She said, "There are places in Alaska where the land remembers too much. Pain, death, sacrifice, it gets absorbed, and sometimes it pushes back." She said it without drama, without trying to scare me. Just the way you'd say, "There's a storm coming." And maybe that's what I felt out there. A storm, not of weather, but of memory. A land remembering the wrong kind of things, or a thing that never forgot what we tried to bury. I won't go back. Not to Alaska, not like that. Maybe one day with the right people, the right guides, but never alone, and never with the kind of arrogance that got me into trouble the first time. I see that now, how my belief in control, in gear and GPS and satellite safety made me blind to the fact that some places just don't want to be found. There's this myth we have as RV campers, especially Americans, this belief that the land is ours to conquer, that the open road is freedom, and that every patch of wilderness is just waiting for us to make a memory out of it. But Alaska doesn't care about your memories, doesn't care about your camera or your Instagram or your solar panel. It's ancient, it's alive, and if you step wrong, if you come with noise in your soul, it will show you exactly how small you are. I think about that sometimes, the size of us, the size of what we think we are. When you're cruising down I-40 in the desert, windows down, music loud, you feel big. You feel like the master of something. But that illusion dies in the deep woods, in places where even the stars don't shine through the canopy, where the ground is soft with centuries of untouched time and the air smells like secrets. There, in that kind of silence, you remember what you really are. Not a conqueror, not a traveler, just a speck, a visitor, a breath. And when you understand that, truly, painfully, viscerally understand that, you start to see the road differently. It's not a line between destinations, it's a thread of fragile choices. One wrong exit, one wrong decision to go deeper instead of turning back. That's all it takes. That's all it took for me. There's a moment I keep going back to. Not the night of the clicking, not the shadow in the tree line. Not even when I saw Ross's RV with its door cracked open like a mouth gasping for help. It's earlier than all that. It's when I first turned off the main road, headed down that gravel path toward the lake. That moment, that choice. It plays in my head on a loop, because deep down I think I knew. I think some part of me felt it, like the forest inhaled when I crossed into it, like it was watching, waiting, measuring. We talk about gut instinct like it's some mystical nonsense, but it's not. It's your body remembering things your brain has forgotten. Evolution's echo, and mine screamed that day. But I ignored it. I smiled and turned the wheel and thought, what could go wrong? Everything. Everything could go wrong. I share this not to scare you away from the wild. The wild has its beauty, its kindness, its quiet redemption. I've seen more stars on the roof of my RV than I ever did growing up in the city. I've sat with strangers turned friends beside fires that melted every layer of distance between us. I've watched snow fall in places no man has touched, and I've cried at the sheer, impossible wonder of it. But wonder doesn't make a place safe. Reverence does. Respect does. Caution does. And the most dangerous thing we can bring into a place like Alaska is entitlement. I was lucky. That's what I've come to accept. Not smart, not brave, just lucky. Whatever that thing was, it let me go. It let me live with a warning, a scratch across the memory instead of the skin. I don't know why. Maybe because I ran. Maybe because I finally listened. Maybe because it didn't need another story. It needed a witness. So now I witness. I tell the tale. I speak its name, not to summon it, but to honor the truth of it. Because we've turned RV camping into a dream, a fantasy escape. And it can be, yes. But it can also become a slow-motion nightmare if you forget that some roads end in silence. Some roads wind into places that were never meant to be touched by tires or boots or curiosity. And some doors, when open, never really close again. I still camp. Of course I do. It's who I am. But I camp with a different heart now. I double-check the weather, sure, but I also read the wind. I pack a first aid kit, but I also carry a compass I don't fully understand. I wave to the rangers, but I also nod to the trees. And sometimes when the fire is low and the night is thick, I whisper a thank you to the dark, just in case it's listening, just in case it remembers me. Because I remember it. I remember the crackle of dead leaves under boots that weren't mine. The way Maggie's frame trembled without wind. The stink of something ancient just beyond the propane tanks. I remember Ross's name on my tongue, screaming through trees that swallowed sound. I remember fear. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The kind that changes the color of the world when you look at it. And most of all, I remember what it felt like to stand in the cold dawn, alive, shaking, breathing, changed. I will never go on an RV trip to Alaska again, not because I hate it, but because I love it too much to disrespect it twice. That land showed me what I really am, what we all really are. Temporary, breakable, not immune, not beyond the reach of what sleeps in the roots of old places. So take your trip, pack your bags, let the highway stretch beneath your wheels and your dreams. But remember this, not all maps are meant to be followed. Not every road takes you back, and sometimes the greatest wisdom you'll ever earn on the road is knowing when to turn around. Let that truth follow you, like the wind through cracked windows, like the soft hush of pine needles against the side of your camper. Let it settle in the space between the thrill and the terror, in that sacred tension where real adventure lives. And when the clicking comes, if it comes, you'll know what I mean.